Good morning. Welcome to the Extra on KRDO News Radio, the show where we connect you with the issues and topics and people that are important to you. And very excited to welcome back Catherine Hammond. Hammond Law Group. Love having you on, Catherine, because you have such helpful information. And today is super helpful. Basically, we're going to talk about being prepared for emergencies. And a lot of folks think, oh, I only need to worry about a will and a plan when I am older. That is absolutely not the case.
Absolutely not. Right.
And sadly, like sometimes what happens is families with children, in the event something happens, is when your office gets a call and they were not prepared. And it's, want to get people prepared. And I know it might be a difficult topic for some, but it's a very important topic. You and I have both been in situations where it's like, okay, got to backtrack and deal. You know what I mean? And not prepared. And we know we've been through it.
Right. And in the middle of the crisis, in the middle of if somebody is in an accident and they're incapacitated, trying to deal with things while trying to watch over the well-being and healing of your loved one is a huge distraction and
Absolutely.
Stress. And if somebody has just passed away and you're grieving and taking care of all kinds of practical things, to have to deal with the legal side of things, then it just adds insult to injury. It's not helpful for your family.
It is not. And the sad thing is it actually not being prepared can actually put you in, say, legal proceedings for even longer, or trying to sort everything out. And in some cases, we're talking years.
Right.
And you don't want that.
As we've both seen.
Yes,
yeah.
As we both have seen. You can end up dealing with court stuff for years.
Right.
So time to get prepared. And I don't want to say especially families with children, but it's very important to make sure your family, especially your kids, are taken care of. Doesn't matter your age if something happens.
And it's interesting because I'll say I think people are a little bit more willing to spend the time and money to put together an estate plan when they have children, whether their children are younger or older. I've had some clients over the years who have thought, I don't have children, even when they're older, and so I really don't care that much what happens to my stuff when I'm gone.
Right.
That's more the exception than the rule. But if you have children, all of this becomes more important. Pretty much everybody has some kind of loved ones,
right,
whether they happen to be your biological children or not. But for those of us with children, biological or adopted or step, however they came into our lives.
Right.
Having a plan or not having a plan has a huge impact on their emotional well-being after you're gone. So helpful to deal with because things happen. So we get in accidents.
Right.
We hear about accidents all the time in Southern Colorado. There are fatal accidents. There are accidents that are debilitating for folks. And then there's medical stuff that comes up. One of my dearest friends in the world was diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago. And it was a serious leukemia where she had to check into the hospital that day and leave everything behind and enter super serious treatment.
Because she found out, they were like, no, you need to be admitted to the hospital right now.
Yes.
Like you are not walking out of here.
Or you will die within the next 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh. How
and
scary.
Situations like that, to have to worry about all the practical stuff in the middle of that is just an extra burden. It frees you and your loved ones up to focus on the things that are even more important in the emergency situation if you have it taken care of in advance. So nobody thinks it's going to happen to them, but that...
As we know, life happens.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's actually focus really quick. Let's dive down into those immediate or emergency situations that come up. And we're kind of focusing on people with kids, but what are immediate things that they need to have in place to be prepared?
Right. So let's talk for just a second about parents with minor children. So if your children are under age 18, one of the things that we need to worry about that most people have never thought about is temporary guardianship. In the emergency situation, whether you are whether you've passed away or whether you're just in the hospital for the next week or month, if the police go knock on the door because you're in the hospital and the babysitter answers the door, they need somebody to whom they can give your children in that emergency situation.
Now, if that situation came up and say a temporary guardian was not named, could DHS come in?
Absolutely.
They could.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that happens regularly.
Wow.
So it's super easy to have some very simple paperwork up on your refrigerator or in the notebook for the babysitter that says, in the event of an emergency, here's who gets temporary guardianship of my kids until a court gets involved. So that's if you have passed away or if you're just in the hospital from an accident. So having some sort of emergency guardianship documents in addition to permanent guardianship documents, we'll talk more about that. But then the other thing is a universal HIPAA release.
Okay. And we've talked about this before, but let's explain that.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of folks and parents can get very confused by that.
Yes. So if I get into an accident, land in the hospital, my children, my parents, my siblings cannot call the hospital typically and find out, am I at that hospital? Or if I am, what room am I in?
That's scary to think
about. The hospitals will not
about.
share that information unless I have signed a universal HIPAA release that says the following people always have a right to my medical information. Super simple. Also helpful for parents of young adult children. So once your child turns 18, if they get into an accident, and I've heard lots and lots of stories from parents to whom this has happened, your child gets into a car accident or they're on a bike or a motorcycle, they land in the hospital, mom calls the hospital, and they won't tell her whether or not her own child is there.
And until they go to court, right? Or get some kind of paperwork.
Typically get a lawyer involved or, yes.
So be prepared for that. And when we come back, we are going to talk about, we touched on temporary guardianship, but we're going to move into permanent guardianship, which I know is very hard for people to think of, especially parents of young children might be hard to think of. And also kind of tiptoe into the money area because that becomes a big factor as well. We're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. You're listening to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Excited to welcome back Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, our monthly check-in. And we are talking about being prepared for emergencies. Catherine and I sadly have been on the end of something happens and not quite ready or not prepared like you need to be. And you're in court for a while and we're talking years or whatever the situation may be. And being prepared, especially if you are have children and even if you're younger, like we were talking about, Catherine, this isn't I'm older, I need to get stuff together thing.
Right.
Need to be.
And once you go to court, if you don't have your stuff together and the emergency happens to you, then you have lawyers involved. Lawyers are not typically known for being fun. And
not generally, no. But you're fun.
Definitely outside of the courtroom.
I was going to say, I'm sure in the courtroom, though, Catherine is like, we're down to business.
So, and it's expensive.
It is.
So, lots of reasons to have a plan in place and not have to deal with the court process for a couple of years.
So before we went to break, we were talking about, especially if you have younger children, kids under 18, if something happens in case of an emergency or an immediate issue, whether it's an accident, medical, death even, temporary guardianship, that needs to be identified, but then move into permanent guardianship. Let's talk more about that.
Right. So if you pass away and you have children who are under age 18, they're going to need some sort of a permanent guardian. And so that's where parents would normally nominate in their will somebody to act as the guardian in the event of their death. So if you're married and your spouse is the other parent of your children, it's a nuclear family in that way, then guardianship would just go to the other surviving parent. Unless there's an issue.
However, things happen, yes.
Right. And so a couple of things can go wrong with that. Number one, let's say that your spouse or ex-spouse does not happen to be a good fit for taking care of your children. And I've talked to a number of parents over the years, particularly with an ex-spouse who has an alcohol or drug addiction or for whatever other reason, is not an appropriate person to be taking care of the children. Super important in that situation to have a will in place, nominate your guardian, and then have some detailed a letter and some documentation showing why the other surviving biological parent is not the appropriate person. But if that's not the situation, it's going to go to the other surviving parent. Let's say you're married, they're still alive. But if both of you are killed in an accident,
correct,
then whoever you have nominated as the guardian in your will, the court is going to have to get involved and make sure that they are an appropriate person. They're going to do a background check, do a police check, make sure that they don't have any kind of abuse or anything in their background. And then through that court process, they could become the guardian. But you get to at least nominate and say who you would want to serve in that capacity. A lot of people don't ever put together a will and nominate a guardian because they can't figure out the perfect person to take care of their kids. And so they put off ever doing a will and naming somebody. It's not going to be any better for your kids if the court has to pick a name out of the hat.
Right, and their kids end up with DHS.
Exactly.
I mean, that's if there's somebody you can put in place to take them.
Right.
And
So
avoid
if you
that,
don't
yeah.
have a perfect person, name the best imperfect person that you have, because that is probably better than whatever the court is going to do, picking out of a hat. Looking at all the group of people who show up in the courtroom who all say we could take the kids, and trying to choose based on who looks the most appropriate. You know your kids the best. Pick the best choice that you have now, even if it's not the perfect choice. You can always change it in the future.
Absolutely, but just have that safety net in place for your children.
Exactly.
And coming up, when we come back with Catherine, we're going to move into the money aspect of this, and it can get very tricky. So we're going to talk about that when we come back on The Extra. You're listening to KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Always excited to welcome Catherine Hammond from the Hammond Law Group. Talk about being prepared in cases of emergencies so you don't put yourself or your family, your children, in a situation where the family may be separated, end up in court for years. I mean, there's lots of things that could happen, Catherine. And before we went to the break, we talked about permanent guardianship for your kids in case, you pass or both of you pass, and you don't want your kids the court deciding who takes care of them.
Right.
And we get into a very I consider it a tricky area. It's kind of sometimes where people come out of the woodworks, don't they? In the event of an emergency and something happens, it's money.
Absolutely. And money always brings people out of the woodwork. So, and some parents of younger children think they really don't need to worry about what happens to the money when they're gone if they would die early, because they don't have that much money to begin with. But remember, there's going to be typically something. If you own a house, whatever equity you have in that. 401ks, business interests, cash in the bank. And then the other thing is life insurance. And I'm a big believer, if you have young children, if you don't have much else in assets, buy some term life insurance from your homeowner's insurance company. Make sure that there's something to take care of your kids. So if your kids are not yet 18 and you die and you haven't set up something to take care of that money and have it managed for your kids, the court will step in to make sure that it's managed for them. And the court is fairly picky about things. So first, we have to divulge all of your personal financial information to the court. And then the court is going to say exactly how every penny can be invested and spent. And then they want to see an accounting to make sure that everything is done exactly the way that they want it done. And so you don't even get to choose. I've sometimes had a judge express opinions about what we can or cannot do, even in terms of life insurance. They're going to talk about what kinds of investments, how the money can or cannot be spent on your kids. So then, let's say you had nothing in place. Court is involved, which means lawyers are involved until your child turns 18 in Colorado. Sometimes it's 21. But then once your child is of legal majority, whatever that is in the state where your child is living, they get a check for whatever is left.
Wow.
So let's say it's even $100,000.
Okay.
Every dollar of that becomes pretty precious. How many 18 to 21-year-olds have you seen do really well?
With $100,000.
Right.
Not going to happen.
They feel really
Right.
good for a short period of time, but a year later they can't remember what they spent it on.
Exactly.
And so if you want that money to actually be meaningful, having it set up so that somebody is managing the money until they're a little bit older is really, really helpful. I typically recommend that people consider not giving a big chunk of cash to kids until they're at least 25.
Right.
Because most of them at 25 are starting to get things figured out. Now, for some young adults, they might be already 25 or older. My girls happen to be turning this month. They're turning 25 and 27. They're responsible young ladies. I'm not concerned about them going out and blowing it. However, they're still learning about their own financial priorities. And so I have things set up in my trust so that they would get a third of their inheritance at age 25, another third at age 30, and the remainder at age 35.
Idea. Yeah.
That way they have 5 years to think about how they spent that last chunk. And typically they get a little bit better with each chunk that they get. So spreading it out in some way is helpful.
Now, and I know this is a case-by-case basis, and you could be like, Renee, that's kind of going in a different, but a lot of times, obviously, when money is involved, the executor of the will has to come in and step in and, execute those wishes. Is it, in some of these cases, when you're dealing with younger children, you may be like, you're clueless, Renee. Is the permanent guardian, it depends on, again, case by case, is the permanent guardian sometimes named the executor?
Yeah, you're not clueless here. It's a really good issue to look at because
could that create sometimes a problem if they're not? I mean, do you see where I'm going with that?
Yes. So there are pros and cons to having the same person be the guardian of your children, taking care of them and managing the money, or maybe having somebody else managing the money who's not the one who's actually taking care of your kids.
Yeah, because sometimes I know like they set up in trusts or whatever, but again, like do they sometimes need a third party to come in to manage the money?
Right.
Because
and
that can get...
Some people want to have the guardians actually making all of the financial decisions and they completely trust the guardians. Sometimes it's a little cleaner to have somebody else managing the money and then coming up with a budget for the kids. While guardian is raising them.
Right.
And so that there's no self-dealing involved.
Right, exactly.
You can't go buy the new Porsche and say that it was for the kids.
Exactly.
Build a large addition onto your home or a swimming pool and say that it was for the kids.
Right.
So that there's a little bit of accountability.
It's a kind of being safe.
Right. And there's another interesting issue that comes up there. For single parents or blended families, even if you're remarried and you have children who are under the age of majority in your state, then when you die, typically that surviving biological parent, even if it's your ex-spouse, if they're going to be named as the guardian, typically they're also the one who's going to be named as the money manager, the conservator, while child is growing up. Do you really want your ex-spouse
being that person?
Right. So a lot of people don't.
So another thing to consider.
Exactly.
Now, parents with young kids, let's give them a kind of a quick list of absolutely things that they should have in place.
Oh, one other thing that I wanted to mention about the money management thing. Some parents with young children haven't thought about the fact that their kids will grow up and maybe get married.
Right.
That's another big thing to be watching out for. If it's important to you that your children, once they get married, don't end up losing their inheritance in a divorce,
right?
It's important to understand just naming your child as the beneficiary does not necessarily mean the inheritance is staying with your child after a divorce.
Wow.
It often gets caught up in that divorce and split 50-50 with their future ex-spouse.
So you have to make sure that that is laid out.
Yes.
That's incredible. So actually, let's take a quick break here, Catherine, and we'll come back and we'll start give that list of absolutely things parents, especially with young children, should have in place. We're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. You're listening to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra. A few more minutes left with Catherine Hammond from Hammond Law Group. And we've been very serious discussion today, but especially having a plan in place, especially if you're a parent with young kids, but just in general, you need to have a plan in place. And before we left off, Catherine, we were going to get a list of stuff, and we may not be able to, I don't think, we only have a few minutes left, cover everything we were going to touch on, but a list that parents with minor children, again, under 18 for the state of Colorado, really should have in place. What are some things they should address, like right now, if they don't have it?
Every adult with children or without children should have a financial power of attorney authorizing somebody to take care of just paying your bills, taking care of basic stuff if you're incapacitated.
Okay.
And it needs to be recent and very comprehensive. Medical directives, healthcare power of attorney, naming somebody to make your medical decisions, living will or advance directive that says how you feel about artificial life support if you have a terminal condition and you've been in a coma or otherwise unconscious for at least a week.
Yeah, you don't want to make your family deal with that.
Right.
That's a hard decision.
Right. And at least express your wishes so they can guess a little.
Absolutely.
Have a little bit of education to their guess.
Okay, well, it's been 7 months. What? I mean,
right.
That's
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And we all know the stories. There are famous stories about that.
Absolutely.
A universal HIPAA release for you, so that if you're in the hospital, your family can find you and come visit you and talk to your doctors about your situation. And then universal HIPAA release for your children who are age 18 and above so that you can get information about them. Then you need a will so that if you have minor children, you can nominate a guardian to take care of them.
And that's both temporary and permanent, correct?
So the will does not handle the temporary guardianship. That's a whole separate document.
Okay.
So that's an emergency guardianship form that we can do. Super important, put that on your refrigerator so that if there's an emergency, babysitter can access that. And then, so the will nominates the guardian, and then for the money management, you need some sort of a trust. Either inside of your will, that's called a will with a testamentary trust.
Okay.
It activates after your death. We still have to go through probate, but after that, the money will be managed by the person of your choosing. Or you can do a revocable living trust. You name the person, it's activated during your lifetime. You don't have to have money in there for your kids today. But it means that you can skip over the whole probate court process after you die.
Right.
And then the other thing that we really encourage parents to do, and we give parents of young children a place to do, we call it a guardianship journal. It's a whole manual that you fill out with information about your children, their doctors, their allergies, their food preferences.
That is a great idea.
What blankie do they need to go to sleep? What songs are they used to? What scares them? All of those things that would be so incredibly helpful if in an emergency somebody else has to step in.
So they're not coming in blindsided like, oh, I didn't know that little Tommy obviously doesn't like meatballs or whatever.
He goes screaming every time.
Every time a meatball shows up on his spaghetti. Well, and I wish we had more time, Catherine, to touch on. We were going to touch on some blended family stuff. And we know today there are a lot of blended families, and those come with different rules and things that need to happen. We were also going to talk about property. But the good thing is you have workshops coming up that people can attend to help start them, guiding them on this.
We do. We have workshops on a regular basis. Our next workshops in Colorado Springs will be Wednesday, May 10th. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 6:30 p.m. And then Saturday, May 13th at 10 o'clock in the morning. You can go online to our website, coloradoestateplan.com, or call our office at 1-800-520-1474 and sign up for one of those.
And the workshops, are they free or are they?
They are free.
Wow, incredible.
And you get a free copy of my book.
I was going to say, but also this information that can help start people, getting organized and getting ready. You do have a book that they can get as well.
Yes, and you get a free copy coming to one of our workshops. We're working on getting that put onto our website so that you can purchase a copy there. So, just get some information, get some basic things in place, whatever is the right thing for you, but don't procrastinate.
Well, and again, I think that's what especially if you have kids. I mean, I think you outlined very well today, like, if you have kids and there's not a plan in place, do you really want your children not, going to HSA until the court figures it out? I mean, you know what I mean? So...
Yep, and it happens.
Yeah, it does.
It happens.
Or getting the last minute calls like you get where everybody's backtracking going,
Right, something has happened. Now, how do we deal with it?
Yeah. Well, Catherine, always great information when you come on today. Thanks for everybody start having their emergency plans in place. They definitely need it. And again, if folks want to contact you, how can they get a hold of you?
They can call our office, 719-520-1474, or go online to coloradoestateplan.com.
Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, thank you so much for coming on today. Always such helpful information.
For bringing all the great information to the community.
Oh, no, thank you for providing it. It's incredible. Thank you, Catherine. And coming up tomorrow, our monthly visit with the Colorado Convention and Visitors Bureau. We'll have more with them tomorrow. You're listening to The Extra on KRDO News Radio.